AITA for not wanting my husband's son to move back in with us. When I met my husband, I knew he had a past. He was honest about it from the start. He had a son from a previous relationship, someone he didn't raise himself, but someone he still felt deeply responsible for. The boy was born overseas, and after a complicated, painful separation from the boy's mother, he was raised by extended family while my husband moved abroad for work, trying to build a stable life and send money back home. When we married, we started a life together here in the US. A few years into our marriage, we had a child of our own. Our little girl was full of light and laughter, and our home finally started to feel whole. My husband worked long hours to provide for us, and I stayed home to care for our daughter. Everything felt balanced, but my husband carried a quiet guilt about his son. He missed all the early years. He wasn't there for birthdays, for school concerts, for anything really. So, after a lot of paperwork and effort, we finally brought his son over to live with us. He was 11 when he arrived. I'll never forget how lost he looked when we picked him up at the airport. He barely said a word, just clutched a small bag and stared down at the floor. From the very beginning, things were hard. He didn't speak English well, and I didn't speak his language. I tried though. I downloaded apps, watched videos, even took a class at the community center to learn the basics. I made his favorite foods, helped him with homework using translation tools, and tried to include him in everything. I never wanted him to feel like he was an outsider in this home, but he never truly accepted me. Whenever I tried to set rules, or even offer gentle guidance, he pushed back. I mean, really pushed back. He'd scream, cry, slam doors, refuse to eat. One time, he locked himself in the bathroom for hours just because I told him he couldn't watch TV until he finished his homework. My husband, who had spent years absent from his son's life, didn't know how to handle it either. He felt guilty, like he didn't have the right to be strict with him. So he made a decision early on. I would handle our daughter, and he would handle his son. I didn't agree, but I respected it. I figured maybe their relationship just needed time. Time passed, but the problems didn't go away. In fact, they grew. The boy refused to do any chores. Dishes piled up, trash was left everywhere, and his room looked like a tornado had hit it. He never offered to help with anything, not even small things like bringing his plate to the sink after dinner. If I asked him to, I'd get eye rolls, muttering, or just flat-out refusal. He also didn't make any friends. Not one. He didn't join any clubs, avoided school events, and wouldn't speak to his classmates. He was falling behind in school, failing several subjects, and his English barely improved. He didn't care. He just wanted to be left alone. And that phone, it became his entire world. Morning to night, he was glued to it. At dinner, in the bathroom, even during family time. It didn't matter what was happening around him. He'd be scrolling, swiping, laughing at something on the screen, completely checked out from everything else. I told my husband I was worried, that this wasn't just a phase, that we were losing him, but nothing changed. My husband didn't want to push too hard. He always came back to the same argument. He's been through so much already. Let's just give him more time. Then something happened that I still think about constantly. Our daughter, who was 3 at the time, got hurt. I was in the kitchen when I heard her cry. I ran in and found her on the floor, holding her arm, clearly in pain. He was standing over her with this odd smirk on his face. I asked what happened, and he said, "She got in my way." Later, I learned he had shoved her because she walked in front of the TV. I told my husband, and he just shrugged it off, said he was probably just frustrated, that he didn't mean it. But I saw the way he looked at her. There was no regret, no worry. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Years went by, nothing improved. He was, now 17, still completely disconnected from the world around him, still failing school, still no friends, still spending all his time on his phone, and still, there were no boundaries. So finally, I stepped in. I told my husband we couldn't keep enabling this, that if we didn't do something now, it might be too late. I decided to limit his screen time, just a few hours a day, so he could focus on school and develop some real-life skills. I thought maybe it would help him reset, but that decision unleashed something I never expected. He lost control, screamed, punched the wall, tried to take the phone back by force. He scratched, bit, kicked. It was like trying to calm a wild animal. I had to physically back away. I called my husband and begged him to come home. That night, we agreed. Enough was enough. He needed help. We found a therapist, and for the first time, my husband backed me. We enforced the phone rules together, but things only got worse. Soon after, he told someone at school that I was hurting him, that I was trying to kill him. CPS came to our home, interviewed all of us, took our daughter out of her classroom to ask her questions. I was humiliated, terrified, and heartbroken. Thankfully, the case was closed. They found no evidence of abuse, but because he said he didn't feel safe around us, he wasn't allowed to return home right away. He moved in with my husband's mother, and then the texts started. started. He sent hateful messages, said he wished I were dead, that he hoped something would happen to our daughter, that he would come back and make us pay. He posted awful things online, twisting the truth, painting himself as a victim. It was cruel, and it didn't stop. Eventually, he told my husband he wanted to leave. He didn't want to live here anymore. He wanted to go back to the country where he was born. My husband, tired, broken, and lost, bought the ticket. That was 6 months ago, and now my husband wants to bring him back. He says his son isn't doing well overseas. Says he doesn't feel like he fits in there either. Says he's alone and struggling. And I believe it. But I also believe that he still blames us for everything. We still get threatening messages. We still feel that fear. My daughter still wakes up with nightmares sometimes. I check the locks twice before bed. I can't forget what he said, what he did. I know my husband loves his son. I understand the guilt, the pain, the helplessness, but I need to protect my family. I need to protect myself. I'm not sure I can survive going through it again. I want to help, but not at the cost of our safety. Not anymore. AITA for not wanting him to move back in with us. Update. It's been about 3 weeks since I shared what's been going on, and in that short time, so much has changed emotionally. Even if the situation itself hasn't fully resolved, I want to thank those who reached out or just read the story quietly. Honestly, putting it all into words helped me see just how much I had buried for the sake of keeping things peaceful at home. After posting, I sat down with my husband and had one of the hardest conversations of our entire marriage. I didn't hold back this time. I told him I was scared, not just uncomfortable or stressed, but genuinely scared of his son coming back. I told him about the dreams I've been having, about how I check every room before going to bed, how I still hear our daughter's cries from that day she was pushed, how I think about that incident every time she walks near stairs or plays near someone bigger than her. I told him that no matter how much I had tried to love and support his son, I was never seen as anything but a threat or a barrier. He listened, and to his credit, he didn't interrupt. He didn't make excuses. He just sat there and cried. It was the first time I really saw how broken he was by all of this. For years, he had tried to do what he thought was right, first by working hard to send money overseas, then by bringing his son here, and finally by trying to support him through the chaos. But what he hadn't done was protect me, protect our daughter, or even protect his son from himself. After that talk, we agreed to take a pause on any decisions. No talk of plane tickets, no more back and forth about what ifs. Instead, we focused on what was happening in our home. We started seeing a family therapist, just the two of us, for the first time in our marriage. The therapist told my husband something that struck him hard, that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no when every part of you wants to say yes. That we also decided to reach out to a nonprofit overseas that helps with youth housing and mental health resources. Through a lot of phone calls and translation help, we learned there might be a structured living program in his son's region, one that offers therapy, job training, and transitional housing. It's not perfect, and it's far from guaranteed that he'll accept the help, but it's a start. Meanwhile, we also began documenting every message and post his son sends. Some of them are quiet, just blank emojis or cryptic phrases. Others are more disturbing, threats toward our family, photos taken from old locations near our house. That triggered something in me I didn't expect, a deep, sharp fear that maybe one day he'll just show up. We got security cameras. We changed passwords. We taught our daughter what to do if someone she doesn't know tries to talk to her outside school. It's not the way I ever thought we'd be living, but I also feel strangely stronger for it. We're not ignoring the problem anymore. We're facing it. And in that process, my husband is starting to accept that the child he hoped to raise here, who he dreamed would grow up to be safe, happy, and stable, may never become that person. At least not in this environment. Maybe not ever. It hurts him. I see it in his eyes every time he opens a new message or looks at the only framed photo of his son we still keep out. But I also see him putting his hand on our daughter's shoulder more often, helping her with puzzles, sitting down for dinner, and actually being present. That we're still in the middle of it. There's no resolution yet, but for the first time, I feel like we're standing on the same side of the problem instead of facing each other like opponents. Update 2. It's been over 2 months since I last updated, and honestly, this has been the most challenging period of my life. The decisions we've made, the steps we've taken, they've come with a weight I never imagined carrying. But in the midst of all this heaviness, I'm starting to find a fragile kind of peace. After weeks of counseling, long talks, and sleepless nights, my husband and I finally agreed on something we had both been avoiding for a long time. We decided that his son will not be coming back to live with us. Not now, and quite possibly not ever. That decision decision didn't come easy. It wasn't born out of anger or giving up on him, but out of a desperate need to protect the people we love most, our daughter, ourselves, and even my husband. Making that choice was heartbreaking. My husband wrestled with it endlessly. I could see him reliving the moments he missed with his son, the birthdays, the first day of school, the little milestones he could never be part of. He held on to the hope that bringing him back here would somehow heal the wounds, would give them a second chance to be a family. But deep down, both of us knew that the wounds were more complicated than love alone could fix. One night, after a particularly tense day, my husband and I sat in the living room while our daughter was asleep upstairs. We talked openly about the fear that had settled in our home. Our daughter, at just 9 years old, had started asking questions about safety in ways no child should have to. She was scared enough to ask if we could keep all the doors locked at night. When she looked at us with those wide, innocent eyes full of worry, it was the moment everything crystallized. We realized then that the safety and well-being of our daughter couldn't be compromised, even if it meant making the hardest choices of our lives. After that, we reached out to a lawyer for guidance. We wanted to be prepared, not only for ourselves, but for the future. We began documenting every threatening message, every disturbing social media post. We secured the house with cameras and changed all the passwords on our online accounts. We even informed our daughter's school about the situation so they could watch out for any unwanted contact. It was painful, invasive, and exhausting, but necessary. Cutting off financial support was a turning point. My husband had been sending money overseas for years, hoping it would help his son build a better life or at least provide some stability. But after repeated harassment and threats, it became clear that sending money only enabled destructive behavior. The moment we stopped the payments was devastating. I could see the grief in my husband's eyes like a storm raging silently inside him, but he knew it was the right thing to do. Despite all of this, there is a small glimmer of hope. That housing program overseas, the one that offers therapy, life skills training, and a structured environment, actually reached out recently. They told us his son showed up at an intake appointment. He didn't stay, but he listened, and that mattered. It was the first sign in years that he might be willing to accept help, even if just a little. Meanwhile, here at home, my husband and I have been slowly rebuilding what the turmoil almost destroyed. We've started taking walks together, something simple but grounding. We're playing board games with our daughter again. For the first time in what feels like forever, laughter is returning to our home, soft, tentative, but real that we still carry scars. Sometimes when my husband goes quiet, I know he's thinking about all we've lost. The what-ifs linger. What if we had done more, been more patient, been stronger? But then I remember the sleepless nights, the bruises, the venomous words, and the fear in our daughter's eyes. And I know we did what we could. Choosing to keep his son away from our home isn't about not loving him. It's about choosing survival, choosing safety, and choosing to protect the family we have. There's guilt, sure, but there's also clarity that I don't know what the future holds for his son. I still hold a small hope that he finds his way, that the help waiting for him will make a difference. But for now, we are focusing on healing, on rebuilding our lives, and on living without fear in the place we call home. Families isn't just about sharing a roof. It's about weaving together histories, traumas, and hopes, often tangled and raw. Your son-in-law's past pain and displacement naturally manifest in resistance and defiance, but that cannot overshadow the safety and emotional well-being of your immediate family that you've demonstrated empathy by learning his language, embracing his culture, and trying to build bridges. That you carried so much guilt and held space for his struggles shows immense strength. Yet, love doesn't mean sacrificing protection, especially when threats and harm enter the equation. Setting firm boundaries is a radical act of care. It's painful, yes, but it is also necessary for survival. The moments you described, the fear for your daughter, the toxic hostility, are red flags no parent should downplay. You don't owe anyone your peace or safety in exchange for giving more time. Sometimes, the kindest act is to say enough and pursue healing apart before rebuilding. Seeking outside help, therapists, nonprofits, legal advice shows you're approaching this with thoughtfulness and a will to do right by everyone. Documenting threats and safeguarding your home are prudent and smart steps, not signs of weakness but resilience. Holding hope for his recovery while choosing distance is a delicate balance. Remember, hope is not the same as obligation. Protecting your family's well-being is your priority, and it's okay to honor that boundary without guilt. In the end, love is complex and messy, but it should never cost your family's security or peace. You're walking a difficult road with grace and courage. Keep listening to your heart and your instincts. They're your best guides. That if there's one piece of advice, it's this: nurture your family's safety and emotional health first. Healing for everyone else can only start once you've created a solid foundation at home. And sometimes that means tough choices and firm no's. You're doing the right thing, even if it's hard to see it now. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, tell us your favorite story in the comments, and if you have your own story to share, let us know down there too. Story 2. AITA for not letting my ex's parents be alone with our kids. We've been divorced for 2 years now, separated for 3. It wasn't a clean split. It wasn't the kind of parting where people hug and say, let's be civil for the kids. It was slow, messy, painful, and by the time the divorce was finalized, we were both completely different people than when we started. But from the beginning, there was one thing I fought for, not out of anger or bitterness, but out of something deeper, fear. And that one thing was this: his parents, especially his mother and grandmother, were never to be left alone with our children. It was written into the custody agreement, legally binding, not because I wanted to punish anyone, not because I had some vendetta, but because I had lived in that house. I had seen things that never left me, things I still think about in the quiet moments, when the kids are asleep and the world goes still. When we were together, I witnessed behaviors from his mother that I could never fully put into words. But I'll try. She touched him in ways no mother should. Intimate touches, lingering hugs that didn't feel right, kisses on the lips, biting his neck like it was a joke, like it was something they shared. Sometimes she'd sit in his lap, rocking slightly, laughing like it was all in good fun. But I saw his eyes. I saw the way he stiffened, the way he'd look at me after, like he wanted to disappear. I asked him about it once. Then again and again, he never gave a real answer. Sometimes he'd say it was normal in his family. Other times, he'd get angry, storm out, blame me for being too sensitive. But there were moments, quiet ones, where he'd just go silent, where his eyes would go blank. And in those moments, I didn't need him to say anything. I knew there was something wrong, something from his childhood that he never processed, something that stayed with him, shaping the way he acted, the way he coped, the way he hurt. During our marriage, he was often emotionally distant, sometimes cruel, sometimes manipulative. He drank more than he should. He had angry outbursts that came out of nowhere. He'd forget things, entire weekends, arguments, trips. He never wanted to talk about his past, and when I brought it up, he shut down completely. Still, I tried. I thought maybe love could fix it, that if I was patient enough, he'd open up. But the more I saw, the more I realized I couldn't change what had already been done to him, and I couldn't stop him from becoming someone I didn't recognize. After we split, I stayed focused on the kids. 2 boys, one still a toddler, the other growing into his personality more every day. Sweet, energetic, curious. They became my reason for everything. But then something else happened. One weekend, my oldest came back from a visit with a mark on his arm. A bite, not a playful nibble, not a child's accident. A real bite, deep enough to leave a bruise. He said it was from their great-grandmother. He was 5. He didn't understand what that meant. He just told the story like it was something that happened. But I knew. I could feel that old, familiar chill crawl down my spine. I brought it up in therapy. I didn't know what to do. The therapist reported it, like they're required to do. It triggered an investigation. My ex was livid. He said I was trying to ruin his life, that I did it on purpose, that I was trying to win. But there was no game here. I just wanted to protect my kids. That was it. Fast forward to now. He's moving a few hours away with his girlfriend. They've been living together for a while, and now they're relocating. We agreed to meet and discuss the custody plan, how things would work going forward, how to handle transportation, holidays, all the logistics. We all sat down. Me, my fiance, my ex, and his girlfriend. It started out civil, then quickly turned tense. Right away, they pushed to remove the restriction, said it wasn't fair that his parents couldn't be alone with the boys, that it made normal parenting things impossible, running errands, date nights, emergencies. His girlfriend said it felt like I didn't trust them to handle things. I stayed calm. I explained why the restriction was in place. I reminded them of the past, of what I had seen, of what had happened. I said I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just didn't feel comfortable, and I had reasons to show I was willing to compromise. I even offered to add the same rule for my own parents. They wouldn't be left alone with the kids either. Equal playing field, but he refused. Said that in the past, I had relied on my parents when the boys were sick or when I had to work. And yes, that's true, because I was working full-time and he rarely helped. I had no choice. I needed support. Now, I'm not working. We live further from my family. I can do it all on my own if I need to. But none of that mattered to him. He said if I couldn't handle it, maybe he should just get full custody. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that he has other family in the area, his brother, cousins, people I trust, people we've both used before for help. But he brushed that off, said he shouldn't have to depend on other people when his parents are available. Then his girlfriend spoke up. She said there was a time she had to go to the emergency room, and he couldn't drive her because the kids were asleep and they couldn't leave them with his parents. She said it wasn't fair, that I was being unreasonable, that I was holding on to things from the past. That I reminded her they had an apartment, that they were moving, that they had options, but apparently, they still planned to visit his parents on weekends, still wanted to use them for childcare. Then she said something that stuck with me. She told me she was in school for child psychology, that she's been trained to look for signs, and that she hadn't seen anything concerning. I looked at her, then at him, and all I could think was, how could you not see it? I asked her one question. If you saw someone do to your partner what I saw happen to mine, would you leave your kids alone with that person? She paused, then said, I don't answer hypotheticals. If he says it didn't happen, then it didn't. And that's when I knew there was no more room for compromise. MYX started gaslighting me again, said I was imagining things, that what I witnessed was just my interpretation, that I was taking away his parents' grandparent rights, that 3 years had gone by and nothing bad had happened. So why couldn't I just let it go? But I hadn't let it go. I had carried it every single day. I had watched over my kids like a hawk, because I knew that all it takes is one moment of silence, one moment of doubt, one moment of trust placed in the wrong hands. That I don't want to go back to court. I don't want my kids to go through that. But I also won't bend on this. Not now. Not ever. My older son has already been hurt once before by another child years ago. I told his dad. He barely reacted, didn't follow up, didn't ask how therapy was going, just brushed it off. If he couldn't protect him then, how can I believe he'll protect him now? The meeting ended with silence, cold stares, a lingering tension that sat between us like fog. And later that night, I found myself apologizing to them, even though I knew I didn't owe them anything, even though I knew I was just trying to keep my boys safe. That's the thing about people like him. They make you feel like you're the problem, like protecting your children is some kind of betrayal, but it's not. It never has been. I just want my kids to grow up safe, to never feel the confusion, the shame, the fear their father once felt, to never carry secrets they don't understand. So here I am, still standing firm, still saying no, even if it makes me the bad guy in their story. Update. I've been meaning to post an update, but honestly, I've been mentally and emotionally drained. A lot has happened since then. The day after that meeting, I got an email from his lawyer. Not him, his lawyer. It was a formal request to modify our custody agreement with the specific intention of removing the clause that prohibits his parents from having unsupervised access to the children. No warning, no follow-up conversation, no attempt to compromise, just paperwork. It felt like a slap in the face that I've spent the last few weeks preparing for a custody hearing. I hired my own lawyer again, thankfully, the same one who handled our original case and knew the history. We started gathering every relevant document, email, text, therapist's note, CPS report, everything I'd ever held on to just in case something like this happened. The timing couldn't have been worse. My fiancé and I are in the middle of planning our wedding, and money's already tight. On top of that, our youngest came down with a nasty summer flu that left him clingy, feverish, and throwing up for days. He just wanted to be held. So I held him during the day, through the night, and through every wave of doubt in my head. And during those long nights, while he slept in my arms, I kept thinking, am I overreacting? Is it really that bad? What if I'm just traumatized? What if I'm seeing shadows where there are none? But every time I asked myself those questions, the answer came back the same. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. And my job is not to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. My job is to protect my children, even if people call me paranoid, dramatic, or bitter. A few days before the hearing, my lawyer received an informal settlement proposal. His side was offering a compromise. The restriction would stay in place most of the time, but could be lifted temporarily in emergency situations and only with prior text notification, meaning they wanted a loophole, a vague, exploitable one, a way to say, oh, it was an emergency without ever defining what that meant. My answer? No, his lawyer called mine and said I was being rigid and refusing to co-parent, that my trauma from the relationship was clouding my judgment, that I was projecting my unresolved issues onto a perfectly normal family dynamic. You want to know what's funny? I haven't cried about my divorce in years, but hearing someone who had never lived in that house, never witnessed those twisted, uncomfortable moments, act like I was just being emotional, that made me cry for hours. Still, I didn't budge. The day of the hearing came. My ex showed up in a new suit, flanked by his girlfriend. She didn't say a word, just sat there, smiling politely like this was all some business negotiation. I brought my lawyer a folder of evidence and every ounce of emotional restraint I could muster. It was a long day, painful at times. His lawyer tried to paint me as controlling, vindictive, overprotective. He cited the times I'd refused last-minute schedule swaps or held the kids back when they were sick because, I actually stay home with them. He even brought up the time my son was bitten and tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, probably another child. He said, even though we both know that's not what happened. But then my lawyer brought out the records, the original therapist's notes, the CPS summary, text messages where I had expressed concern long before the split, screenshots of my my ex admitting his mother had boundary issues, but that he didn't want to deal with it. The judge didn't make a final decision that day. She said she'd review everything carefully because of the sensitivity of the situation. But I saw something in her eyes. The way she looked at me when I spoke. The way her expression tightened when my lawyer described the lingering, inappropriate behavior from his mother and grandmother. I saw empathy. I saw recognition. That was 2 weeks ago that we got the ruling 3 days ago. The judge ruled in my favor. The restriction stands, without exceptions. No unsupervised visits with his parents or grandmother. Period. She also added an amendment. If my ex violates that order, I have grounds to petition for primary custody with limited visitation rights. It's a relief. A huge one. But it also comes with a weight I didn't expect. My ex hasn't spoken to me since. No texts. No follow-up. Nothing. He picked the kids up for his usual weekend. Didn't say a word at the door. Just took them and left. The kids were quiet when they got back. My oldest said daddy seemed mad, and that grandma wasn't allowed to come to the park with them anymore. I hate that. I hate that my sons are caught in the middle of something they'll never fully understand. I hate that, despite all my efforts, they still feel the tension. But I also know this. One day, they'll be older. One day, they'll ask questions, and I'll be able to look them in the eye and say, I did everything I could to keep you safe, even when it wasn't easy, even when people hated me for it. That's what being a parent means. So yeah, I may be the villain in my ex's story, maybe even in his girlfriend's, but in my son's story, I'm the one who stood her ground, the one who said no, even when it would have been easier to just give in, and I can live with that. Your ex's family dynamic. That's not tradition. That's trauma dressed in heirlooms. People love labeling moms as overreacting, but rarely ask why they're reacting in the first place. Spoiler alert, it's because they noticed what others ignored. You gave compromise a chance. You gave warnings. You gave explanations. At some point, giving more just becomes giving in, and thank God you didn't. A woman studying child psychology isn't a human lie detector. She's not immune to bias just because she owns textbooks. If anything, her refusal to address hypotheticals was the loudest silence in the room. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell us your favorite story in the comments, and feel free to share your own story too.